Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Lessons of the Woods by 10 Point Whitetails. I'm your host, Dillan Porter, and with me we have our co-host, Kyle Weber. Now, we did post on Facebook, I think this morning of the recording here, that we were going to have a special guest on today, Jared Dalton from Outdoor X Media. And we got a text message not too long ago that he will be unable to attend tonight. Maybe we shouldn't say why. That might not be public knowledge.
Yeah, maybe.
Sure. He has a family issue that, not a bad issue, may or may not be resolved by the time this comes out. Be fun to talk to him in the future, but he will be unable to join us tonight. So we are spitballing and came up with some stuff of our own to talk about because that's what we do, right?
Yep. And he said he'll reschedule. He's going to reschedule for later this week, next week, this weekend, next week sometime, depending on how things go. So I hope, all positive for them. So, but just not tonight, but
not tonight.
Soon to be.
Soon. We'll see. Soon as he's able.
Yep.
Not that he got hurt or anything, but, life comes at you. What are you going to do? So yeah, we're going to talk about whitetail genetics tonight. And I even prepared a slideshow in the brief 30 minutes before the show. Well, that's actually before Kyle and I started talking football for the last hour when we're supposed to be recording.
Lessons of the Woods on the field. Football podcast.
Football field, yeah. If you want us to do a football podcast as well, let us know. We could do a special football podcast. That'd be fun. Because we just discussed all the problems with both the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings and what they need to change to be better next year. Because they both are not great.
Hear this. What did we do? We sent Aaron Rodgers to the Raiders. We got Stephen Bennett on the Packers and Tua on the Vikings.
Potentially Tua on the Vikings or anybody else. Not that I hate Kirk Cousins. I like Kirk Cousins, but I don't know what's going to happen this year. But we're getting off topic yet again. This is the fourth time we've tried starting this podcast tonight because we were just so adamantly talking and enjoying football.
Whitetail genetics.
So, warning, for those of you that are on an audio-only version, if you found us on iHeartRadio or Apple Podcasts or Audible or Amazon Podcasts or Spotify, do yourself a favor, go find us on either YouTube or Facebook or the video version on Spotify because there's going to be a lot of visual aid tonight in the form of pictures of large white-tailed deer. Because who doesn't love large white-tailed deer? We're going to be going through some history of my dad's deer farm is what we're doing. And talking how fast. You
can sign out now.
Yeah.
You can sign out now if you do not like big white-tailed deer. I'm just going to let you know.
Yep.
If you
don't even bother listening. We'll show you the door.
Go watch some football podcasts.
Or tell us how much you hate large white-tailed deer and then give us a rating on iTunes.
There you go. Perfect.
But a 5-star rating, not a 1-star. Come on. So I am actually going to switch to presenting here. An entire screen. And I want this screen. Oh, did that lock up? Share. Oh, there it is. Okay, working on it. So, we are going to talk whitetail genetics today and how fast they can affect your deer herd. So, we're going to do a little bit of explanation on what artificial insemination is, because that's the fastest way we were able to change our deer herd. And this does apply to the hunting community in several ways on how fast your herd can change. So if you've had a white-tailed deer herd that's been stagnant genetically, you always have the same thing, nothing ever changes, in about 3 generations, your entire white-tailed deer herd can begin to change. So that's what I'm going to try to show tonight. And that means a new buck walked onto your property and bred some does, and now suddenly, instead of only 1 brow tine on all of your bucks, you have 2, basically. Okay? So, artificial insemination is a process where you take semen off of a buck, you freeze it in liquid nitrogen, 320-ish degrees below zero, and then it's stored in that liquid nitrogen indefinitely. It can be stored, indefinitely. As long as it's kept cold and the tank's full, forever. And then you can take that semen, thaw it out, heat it up to 90 degrees, and get the little guys all moving around in there, stick it into a doe and heat. 195 days later, if things went well, you have fawns on the ground. So we've done this since 2007 or 8. I think we've been doing this on my dad's farm. Originally, we did it vaginally, which is much more complicated and much lower success rate. The first year we AI'd vaginally, we had a 60% success rate. Second year, we had 50% success rate. Third year, we had one doe for 8 got pregnant. That sucked. Spent a lot of money. Because this stuff's not cheap, if you can imagine. Whitetail deer straws typically go from anywhere from 600 on the low end to I've seen as much as 4,500 to 10,000. Dad's never spent that kind of money on it though, because that's crazy for a chance. Year after we had one deer get bred, we had 0 deer get pregnant. So then we switched to what's called laparoscopic artificial insemination. We contacted a couple of vets from Wisconsin, and they travel around. They do a circuit up here every year and artificially inseminate at 7 or 8 different farms on the way. It starts with you give them a couple of shots, give the does a progesterone implant. They think they're pregnant. 2 weeks later, you pull out the progesterone implant. Now they think they've aborted. And 55 to 65 hours later, they come into heat without fail because they think we need to get bred. So that's how you get them all to sync up. So we'll typically breed 10 to 13 deer in about an hour and a half period. Go ahead, Kyle.
I was saying the reason you go through that process is to time all of it's almost like setting a timer for all the deer. So that's why you do them steps instead of just letting the doe naturally come into heat. You almost set the clock, and then watching your watch 55 hours and go. Yep. Rather than the buck that does the flaming curl and does all this stuff, and you guys got videos of that on telling if a doe is in heat. You're making her think she's pregnant, removing that which creates her to think she aborted the fawn or lost the fawn. Mm-hmm. So then you have it timed when she's going to go to heat next, rather than you guys guessing, right?
Yep, exactly. Because if we were to guess, number one, we got to have the vets on location when we do this, and they don't want to be on location for 2 weeks. They want to be here for 2 or 3 hours, take off, head to the next place. So they tell us, they'll actually send us a schedule and say, hey, at this time on this day, put in the progesterone implant. Sometime on this day, or actually at this exact time on this day, pull out the progesterone implant and give this shot. And then 55 to 60 hours later, we'll be there and we'll do the surgery. And if everything goes well, you have deer pregnant. Since switching to laparoscopic AI, we have about an 80% success rate, which is phenomenal. Fantastic. So these guys developed their method actually on sheep. It's a well-taught method. They AI sheep all the time. They said they can do over 100 sheep a day. No problem. Sheep semen is significantly cheaper, normally around $10 to $100 per shot. We can split the straws. So it's a half cc straw, and you can split that up to 3 ways between 3 does. Still have an 80% success rate. So in the photos we're showing here, this is the beginning of the process here. So you can see that this doe is upside down. We have to sedate the does to do this minor surgery on them. He makes a 2 slits about an inch in size. And you can see he's looking through a little scope. So he can actually see right in there with a little camera. They've put a little bit of CO2 inside the stomach cavity just so they can see in there a little bit better. And the guy on the right here is actually got the semen in a little syringe, and he gets directed directly into the fallopian tubes and injects the semen through a teeny tiny little pipette. Okay, here you can see another little angle of them working on it. The does recover from this pretty quickly. Usually they're all up and walking within half an hour of this procedure. Like nothing ever happened. They don't have a clue. They have a little teeny tiny incisions. Oh, I went too far. And everything's good to go. It's not animal cruelty. Don't even go there, okay? Animal husbandry. Really easy to do as long as you have the equipment to do it and the training, and goes very well. Go ahead.
And we talk about, animal cruelty. This is way less stressful for a doe.
Yeah.
Than to be thrown into a pen with 10 other does and a very large, aggressive in-rut buck. Right? I mean, that can borderline kill a doe.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they do end up going in with a buck 20 days later, just in case they did get pregnant. We do put them in with a buck.
Right.
And
But
he's
what I'm
the
saying is,
backup buck. But there is a high stress scenario when they're all in with a buck ready to get bred. Even in the wild, and they're in with a buck ready to get bred, there's a high stress scenario because the does, if they're not cooperative, the bucks can be very aggressive and angry.
yeah, I mean, you can watch these videos of these does being chased by a buck, and their mouths are open. They're doing it. Not all of them, but there's a reason why when a doe gets bred, she lays down because she is shot. She's go run a marathon, and then ladies go run a marathon, and then have a guy bounce on top of you. That's what the bucks do. They'll run them ragged to breed them, and they get knocked out, and then they get I don't know what the word is, but
reversed is what they call it. Reversal.
They reverse it. They're back up. They got an incision, but they can't feel it. They can't hurt themselves with it, and they didn't get meleeed, to say the least. Obviously, you said that you put them in a pen just in case it wasn't successful. Potentially, that's the other buck. So they still go through that period, but this, compared to that, is way less stressful, dangerous, and it improves your success rate because you're doing it. You're putting exactly where it needs to go. You're not relying on natural breeding. You're not relying on all of that factors. You're doing 100% work right here, and your percentages are matching that. So
yeah, typically dad only has 1 or 2 does that don't take in any given year, and I think this year he AI'd 17 or 18 does. I don't remember, but also with this, if you've been listening to our podcast, we had a bonus episode a couple of weeks ago where my dad interviewed a guy about genetic markers in whitetail deer and preventing CWD. He's able to take this year now, and every buck he AI'd to has the genetic markers for preventing CWD. So we can instantly increase our herd's overall health through artificial insemination.
And that's what I was just actually going to say was, with this process, you can selectively pick, and up until this point, you would pick for antlers, antler size, antler growth, antler maturity, all buck size, whether they weigh 300 pounds or 200 pounds. You're selecting a specific deer, specific buck to breed that specific doe based on their bloodline. Now, what I was going to say was exactly that. Whether you care about your antlers or not, now you can breed genetic markers that make them CWD resistant. And in the world that we live in with deer farming now, a CWD resistant buck is way more valuable than a 300-inch buck. In my opinion, you can sell his semen to other farms. You can breed him to your does and protect all of your does and protect all of your fawns, which is protecting your farm and your business and your industry. So a CWD resistant buck with all the right markers, selectively breeding to a CWD resistant marked doe, is a way more valuable deer than the biggest deer you could grow antler wise.
Oh,
in my opinion.
Absolutely. Because imagine let's say an apocalyptic type scenario here, right? If CWD is as bad as everybody says it is, but this genetic markers is working the way it is, can you envision a scenario where there are no deer left outside of a fence?
Yep. I think, and if I didn't say it in those podcasts, exactly that. Pretty soon, because of the failed DNR in Wisconsin and the failed DNR procedures in Minnesota, specifically, because that's what we're aware of, at some point we're going to have no deer. We're going to have no deer.
Yep.
We're just not going to have it. And the DNR or people are going to go and beg the deer farmers, give us some of your CWD resistant deer. We can't control this issue. We don't know what we're doing.
Yep.
Help us. And everybody says, no, they won't. 30 miles down the road in Clam Lake, there's an elk herd in Wisconsin from me. Those elk are deer farm elk or elk farm elk. They got bought from an elk farm. They got brought over here and put there. Because they can't go tag an elk out in Montana, drag them, Real quick rant. Yes, that is 100% going to happen if the Minnesota and Wisconsin DNR don't pull their heads out of their keisters and figure it out. Because we're going to shoot all our deer. There's going to be no deer out in the wild, and we're going to depend on deer farms. And one of two things is going to happen. We're going to buy deer from deer farms to have CWD resistant deer out in the wild, or every hunter that still wants to hunt is going to go to a deer farm.
Mm-hmm.
And all you people that are against deer farming are going to realize you have to go to a deer farm to shoot a deer.
Deer
That's what you're
farms are
going to be
doing
with.
all of the work on our own dollar to save whitetail deer from CWD.
And if you have a problem with going to a deer farm or shooting deer farm deer that are out in the wild or the elk that are 30 miles away from me, that's fine. But do not go fishing on a lake that is stocked on a regular basis.
It's the
Because
same thing.
those fish are in a hatchery, controlled environment, raised, and then deposited in these legs for you to catch.
Mm-hmm.
Don't blow smoke up my butt with that. If you and all the lakes get stocked, you can look at those stocking reports. Well, imagine if 30 miles away from you the other way is national forest, 12,000 acres. Can you imagine if they stocked 30 deer from your deer farm?
Oh, it'd be insane. And we're going to talk
CWD
about
resistant bucks.
how fast it changes your herd. It's 3 generations and your herd is completely changed. 3 generations, which in whitetail deer years, that's 6 years.
Well,
6 years.
The average deer in Wisconsin and Minnesota lives to 2 to 3 at best. At best. So in 6 years, you've gone through 2 generations.
3.
It's not
Your 3rd generation is alive by 6 years.
Yes. So you've already cleared that out. And the way we hunt around here, we wipe out the population. There's nothing available. So they're super influenced. We all shoot all the bucks and we leave all the does. Those does are super susceptible to genetic changes. If you shoot the 3 bucks you have on your property, let's just say your kids shoot 3 bucks. Those does next year get bred by a different buck from a different area.
Mm-hmm.
You've just completely altered the genetic makeup. Because it's a totally different stud in the pen, in the farm. You've totally changed it. If he was a 10-point mainframe, your genetics are changed. Now I get it, the does have genetics and they have 50% of it, but you've totally changed it. Mm-hmm. So, all right, go ahead. Sorry, I'm ranting.
No, we gotta rant. That's what we do. So be very on brand of us to rant. So that's how artificial insemination works. There's probably more that goes into it. There's definitely more that goes into it. But that's basically how it works. So it's really easy to change your herd's genetics as a deer farmer or cattle or sheep. With cattle, they don't do laparoscopic, to my understanding, because it's really hard to flip a cow upside down. I haven't tried it lately. I don't think I'm that type of guy anymore where I can just flip a cow. Getting old, man. Getting old. So, moving on. This is my dad's first buck he ever purchased right here. Okay, this is a buck named Clyde. Dad drove out to a deer farm in Mountain, North Dakota, picked up this buck as a fawn, drove him home, and I think this is a 4-year-old picture. 4 years old, Clyde was 176 inches. Biggest buck my dad had ever seen, period. At 5, he was 185 or 186. Didn't get a lot bigger. And he hovered around the 170, 180 mark. Lived to be 9 years old. And if you happen to be near a specific Cabela's, I believe in Nebraska, I don't remember, all of Clyde's antlers are on display in a Cabela's somewhere. So if you see 9 sets of antlers off of 1 buck in a Cabela's, they're probably Clyde. So beautiful deer. He's the one that started it all, okay? But him and his offspring always stuck around at 170 to 180 mark. Never got any bigger. Genetics, okay? So, time passes, we decide we need a new breed buck. So Dad goes to Wisconsin. Now this is actually the last deer that Dad ever purchased. Okay? He goes to Wisconsin and picks up a 1-day-old fawn, or 5 days old, somewhere in that range. Really hard to keep a little fawn alive. He pays $5,000 for this fawn. This fawn is out of fantastic genetics, 300 plus inch bucks in his pedigree. If anybody's listening who understands those genetics, we're talking the original Maxbow. There's Maxbow. I think Maxbow was in there twice. And I'm drawing a blank on what the other ones might have been. But like this is the buck. Got him from a deer farmer named Ron Pierce in Wisconsin. $5,000. You know how much Dad paid for Clyde? $250. $200. $200. This is a far cry different. Now, this was probably 2004, 2005. Okay?
But this buck with the pedigree that he has and the potential he has drives that price up. Clyde, you
Absolutely.
were going to get, to me, an impressive buck, but a less than impressive deer for the deer farming world.
Hmm.
And he grew up 9 years old. That he had good antlers. He was a beautiful deer,
Yep.
but that's the capacity. That's that bloodline.
His genetic
So,
potential was 180 inches. That's what he
yep,
and his bloodline could produce. So
yep.
we can only breed to that so long, and we'll never get above it. Okay? A 180-inch buck isn't suddenly going to turn into a 250-inch buck. So we get Remington. He's our main breed buck. This guy, we're excited. I don't have a picture of this. I wish I did. At a year and a half old, this buck that we paid $5,000 for, who, by the way, was born on the exact same day as another buck named Redwood. Redwood is our old bloodline. Redwood, at a year and a half, is like 250 pounds. Monstrous bodied deer. Nice 10-point rack. I think he scored 107 inches. Remington, the buck that Dad spent a lot of money on, he's like 105 pounds. Small bodied deer. On one side, he has 4 points like this. Like, I'm not even kidding. It sticks out of his head like this. Like a pitchfork. Right off the top of his head. If you're not watching the video, you should be. And then he had a normal 6-point side, or a 3-point side on the other, like he's a 6-pointer. That's Dad's $5,000 deer. Now, looking at these two bucks, you'd be like, there's no way in heck we're breeding with Remington. He looks ridiculous. Redwood's the guy. On paper, Remington's a far better deer. Remington is also super aggressive and hated everybody and everything in the whole world. He almost got himself killed at a year and a half old. He decided, I'm really tough. I'm going to pick a fight with a 5-year-old that weighs 400 pounds. He got his butt kicked, full of holes, stood in one place and shook for 3 days. Dad was bringing him food and water because the deer couldn't walk. He couldn't stand up, couldn't lay down. Almost died. He pulled through. At 5 years old, Remington has now bred every doe on the property for 5 years. He is 230 inches. Biggest buck we've ever had. He was 160 at 2, 180 at 3, like 210 at 4, and then 230 at 5. Okay? Beautiful
And
deer.
that's him here on this picture.
That's him on the picture at 5 years old. This set of antlers is still in my dad's basement. Then Remington decides to go get himself killed in velvet in his 5th year. Yep, great. Super aggressive buck, picked on somebody who had just shed their velvet, and he had not, and got his butt kicked. Never got over 250 pounds. Small-bodied deer. We sold nearly every fawn ever produced out of this buck. Everybody wanted to buy fawns out of him. His fawns on our farm never got over 190. Ever. Every fawn we sold, 250, 260. No idea why. Doesn't make sense. One year I bottle fed 17 fawns out of this guy. 2 of them died. 15 were sold. Crazy. Everybody loved his pedigree. Just wouldn't produce on our farm for whatever reason. And we've gotten better at knowing. We've learned a lot more since then. Okay? Redwood at 5 years old, 170 inches. Never got any bigger than that. He weighed over 400 pounds. He lived to be 13 years old, I think. 420 plus pounds is what we figure his prime was. Monstrous bodied deer. Huge bodied deer. So, this is one of Remington's sons. He's nice, but that's a 4-year-old. 170 maybe. 165. Just not that great. But look at the body size.
Look at the body size. Look at the neck rolls. But also, for people not watching, I wish I could explain it to you. Dillan said it's 160-inch whitetail, but it's a mainframe 10.
Mm-hmm.
Super clean, super good G2s, G3s, G4s. Looks like a couple little things on his bases, but in Wisconsin, that's a absolute trophy. Even at 4 years old, that's a stud of a deer.
I'd shoot this deer all day long.
Yep.
Never be sad about it. But
so when we're talking this deer, for the people that aren't watching, it's like, oh, that's a nice buck, yeah. But when we're saying small or didn't amount to much, we're talking in the deer farm world.
Deer farm world's completely different.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to how different it is. It gets wild. But big-bodied deer. Remington was not a big-bodied deer. He would throw some big-bodied pigs if bred to the correct does. This is a buck that we AI'd to named Soaring Eagle. So that year that I said we had a single doe get bred to AI through vaginal AI, this is the sire to that doe. This is the only doe that got bred in that cycle. This is her sire. This is the sire to the fawn. This is a buck named Soaring Eagle. He was 300 inches at 3 years of age. Unheard of. The biggest buck we've had at this point. I don't even think Remington was 5 at this point. I think he was 3 or 4 when we did this AI. So the biggest buck we've had at this point isn't even 200 inches. Hadn't even gotten there yet. And Dad got a straw semen out of a buck that's 300 inches at 4. We're like, that's... Or 3, I mean, yeah. 300 at 3. We're like, this is exciting. We're super stoked. One doe gets bred. She gives us one doe fawn. So we're sad, but that doe has got power now. So we named that doe Lee, L-E. Spelled it L-E-E because that's easier to figure out. Standing for Lonely Eagle. She's the only one. So that doe grows up. This is her daddy, Monster Buck. She grows up. We breed her to this guy. This buck was 232 at 2. I think this is an older photo. This is a buck named Silverstorm. Beautiful buck. Got the width, got the height, got the brow tines, got the drop tines. This buck's got it all. 232 at 2. And that doe gives us one doe fawn to this pairing.
Which, for the people that don't get it, you want buck fawns. Buck fawns generate money. You can have a breeding core. A doe fawn, although you can breed to her, doesn't provide.
A doe fawn can only have 1 or 2 fawns a year. A buck fawn, when he's in breeding age, can have lots of fawns a year. So we wanted a buck fawn. We thought. We didn't know. We thought we wanted a buck fawn. Silverstorm, beautiful buck. Gave us a doe. We got one doe fawn again. But now this doe fawn, she's Soaring Eagle, is her grandpa. Silverstorm is her daddy. And if we're doing the math here, so let's say it's a perfect 50-50 split on DNA, which it's not. Does provide 60 to 75% of the DNA, but we don't care about that right now. Okay, we're going to say it's perfect 50-50 for math reasons. So, Lee is 50% Soaring Eagle, 50% Clyde's bloodline of 170, 180 inches. Her fawn is now 75% bucks over 200 inches, counting counting Soaring Eagle and Silverstorm, and only 25% little boys. Little boys. In quotations, 170-inch deer, right? So now she's already 75%. Now, that doe fawn grows up. What do we AI her to? She's special. She's very special. Big. We AI her to a 1.5-year-old buck named XL747 that scored 279 inches at 18 months.
Look at that goofy guy, huh?
Isn't that crazy? 18 months old. That buck is 18 months old. So now her offspring, this doe fawn, when she's AI'd to this buck, she gives us one buck fawn. A big buck fawn.
So in a rolling the dice, 2 doe fawns is okay. So 1 doe fawn's the worst option.
Yep.
2 doe fawns is better. 1 doe, 1 buck is pretty good. 1 buck fawn is gooder.
Twin bucks, more gooder yet.
Yeah, and then 2 twin bucks is great, and then triplets is a freaking dream. But just so you guys understand that 1 doe fawn is bad, not great. 2 doe fawns isn't great. A buck fawn, we're in the right track.
So we finally get our buck fawn.
And you guys breed specific does because she produces 2 buck fawns or 2 doe. I mean, that comes into your thought process too, right?
Yes and no. And also, you can buy sexed semen. So that means, I'm not exactly 100% sure on the process. I think it has something to do with magnets and centrifuges. I don't know for sure. But you can buy semen that's specifically male or specifically female to have bucks or doe fawns. Because it's the male that determines it, right? I don't think we've ever used sex semen. we're happy with the roll of the dice because we've been pretty lucky that way.
Yep.
But bucks are definitely have more face value than does. They can breed more deer. So if you're looking for a breeder, you want a buck.
So the reason I ask these questions or I'm pointing these extra little bits out is for somebody that's got a million cameras on their property. You can watch your deer and see this. If you recognize a doe, the monarch doe, as we talked last 2 podcasts, and you see she's only producing doe fawns I learn more from each fawn that comes in. Binos, I see nubs, I see some testicles. I go, that's a buck fawn. Okay. I really pay attention to that. So if you see this monarch doe and you somehow can recognize her on your land and you see 2 years in a row that she's got 2 doe twins or one doe, a single fawn specifically, and it's a doe, and you notice those trends, you can facilitate your breeding and or your genetics in this way. And we're talking extreme in a deer farm, but it's a controlled environment. And what I'm trying to say is you can implement these things if you want to be as crazy as us on your property. And you see this doe, I have a doe that's got a half a tail. She's got a unique marker, so I can pay attention to who she is. And I can see this year she had 2 doe fawns, or excuse me, she had 1 doe fawn and 1 yearling fawn or doe. So next year, if I see she's got a yearling doe and another doe, I'm probably going to get rid of her because she's not producing buck fawns.
Depending on your area and your goal for your herd. If you want more deer, you want those does producing doe fawns.
Yes, you're right. You are right. But I'm just saying, we're in a controlled environment here.
Controlled environment, we can do whatever we want.
You can also implement this information. So if you don't like deer farming, you don't have any interest in this 200 and some inch yearling, that's okay. But we're trying to say you can pay attention and realize how this process work out in the wild. If you just
there's ways to apply it, and there's ways to, and even if you can't find a way to apply it in your situation, it's fascinating what whitetail deer are capable of. And everybody says, "Oh, you're feeding them really good," or it's hormones, or you're going in and splicing DNA, or no, we're not doing any of that. There's no steroids right now. Most of the year right now, Dad's feeding his deer. You barely would want to feed it to cows. It's not great. It's pea chips, sunflower screenings, and whole corn. It's not a great recipe, but his deer are doing well, and it's cheap feed.
And Clyde ate that same stuff as the deer we're about to talk about. They're eating the same food, the same process over the last 10 years.
Yep.
So the genetics
are huge.
I would say 6 years ago, your genetics 6 years ago compared to today are astronomically different. Look at the picture of the buck that my first buck I shot, 207. And then we'll show what I assume you got this year's buck. The big song and dance.
We'll have the video soon.
Okay.
We're working on it.
No, not mine. The big one.
Oh, I actually don't even have that on here. I can grab that, but I don't even have that on here. We'll get there.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
So, we finally get our buck fawn now out of all of this AIing. And this is a buck we named Double XL. Okay? Double XL, he was the foundation for starting our herd to really take off. So, XL 747, beautiful yearling, 279 at a year and a half. He actually only scored 276 at 2. He went backwards. Don't remember what happened to him after that. I think he was in Missouri. I think he might have got EHD and died. I know he got EHD or something after this year. After his first year, he went downhill because he got sick. Not that big a deal. We're happy with Double XL. So, year 1, Double XL. First set of antlers, he's 164 inches. This is the biggest yearling we had ever had at that point. We couldn't believe that he was that big. I got his antlers right here. They go with me everywhere I go. Well, not really, but if you're watching a video podcast, watch. This G2 on a yearling buck is 13 inches. Okay? This is not a short G2. This is incredible for a yearling buck. So guess what? Double XL got to breed a lot of does at a year and a half. I think we gave him 10. We're pretty sure that was all he could manage. Not a huge bodied deer. I actually have a picture of this buck standing next to Redwood. who I mentioned earlier. I should find it and post it again. Redwood was a freaking beast body-wise. So these two bucks are standing side by side, both looking at the camera. Phenomenal photo. I could win awards with that photo probably. Beautiful. Redwood, triple the size body. But the antlers probably score within 10 inches of each other. Interesting stuff. So, double XL turns 2. Oh, now it's not going.
No, you said...
There it is.
You said double XL there was 179?
164.
164. But his sire...
was 279 at a year and a half.
So that shows you how much influence the doe had on it. Mm-hmm. Even though she had a pedigree of 300-inch deer or 200-inch deer, look at he's substantially smaller at that point. So you look at that and go, you think his daddy's good, but where are we going to go? And then this happens.
So double XL turns 2. That's this antler behind me right here. I have all of double XL's antlers in the basement here. Dad actually said I could keep them because I bottle fed them, and why not? So double XL turns 2. Scores 242 inches at 2 years of age. Now, prior to this, we'd only had a 230, and that was on a 5-year-old buck. This is a 2-year-old.
Can you grab both his rights or both his lefts real quick and step back?
From his 2-year-old set?
His yearling to his 2-year-old.
I don't have both of his yearling. They're in the basement, but it's going to be like a 5-minute process to go grab them.
Oh, gotcha.
But his yearling set. Okay. Got to figure out what's the best way to look at the camera here.
That's it.
There we go.
What's that one on behind you there?
So that is one of his 2-year-olds.
So set that one. Yeah. Just look at the increase. Just the.
Okay, I can stand up.
I hope you're watching this, everybody.
People, come on, check us out our video podcast because they're way funner.
Dylan's about to do a song and dance for us.
Yep. So
what I want you to do is, to
2.
Look at the jump. So we say as a yearling he wasn't as good as his father, but now you're starting to see that father size come out. Look at the mass. Look at Dylan's hand on that thing. That is.
And this is only 2. Okay. So 242 at 2. I almost dropped that on the floor. I'd have cried.
I'm putting you on the spot here tonight, man.
242 at 2. Biggest buck we've ever had on the property, period. And the buck's only 2 years old. Okay. So we are beyond excited and happy. And double XL gets to breed a lot of does again. So double XL turns 3. He was 296 at 3. Nearly 300 inches. We'd never had a 250 before. He went from 242 at 2 to 296 at 3. That's 54 inches. My math is right. Insane. Crazy. At his widest, I don't know if it was this year or not, he was 34 inches wide, I think, outside to outside. Insane deer. Breed a lot of does. Double XL turns 4. We are excited. What is this boy going to do? We never had a 300-inch deer. Is he going to hit 300 in his one more year? He has 4 inches to go. He didn't hit 300. He hit 415 at 4. He skipped over 300.
So, and we talk about this. When does the skeletal structure of a whitetail deer no longer need the nutrients?
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, which is at about, depending on where you're at, what's going on, in double XL's case, at 3 years old, he was basically fully mature.
Physically.
So now all of his nutrition doesn't got to go to his muscles, doesn't have to go to his skeleton. He's not growing size-wise anymore. So it all goes to his head.
Mm-hmm.
115 plus 119-inch increase.
Yep. In my experience as a deer farmer, the biggest jump is typically between ages 3 and 4.
So
majority of the time.
If you're watching trail cameras and you're watching your deer herd and your age classes and stuff like that, and man, he's a nice 3-year-old. By golly, give him a chance, because that biggest jump is going to put him in another on your land, not on a deer farm, on your land.
Mm-hmm.
If he's even a nice 10, 120, 140 inch 10, he's 3 years old, and you know that. Give him that year, especially if you got him in daylight, because you know he's huntable.
Mm-hmm.
You know he's smart, but you know you have a chance. Don't educate him. Give him that extra year because he might blow up. He's not going to do 115 inches.
But he could do 25. He could do
So he
30
goes from 130, 140 to a 160, 170.
or 180, 190.
So that third year, I would say if you're going to shoot a 2-year-old, based on where you're hunting, if you're going to shoot a 2-year-old, the argument's less to a 3-year-old because he might not increase a ton.
They do, but it's still. I would say if you can let him grow, let him grow.
Well, it's going to go
your
to
2-year-old jump. Your 2-year-olds on average. Now I'm gonna get people that get mad at me and yell at me. Your average scores in the wild in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Your yearling bucks can be at fork horn, spike buck, up to 110 inches. I shot a wild yearling, clearly a yearling buck, when I was first started bow hunting. That was 107 inches. That's a yearling buck that Kyle's holding up right now, and he scores not too far off of 100 inches.
You can see my shoulders. I'm not.
Yep.
I'm not the widest person in the world, but
Look at the tine length. Look at the mass. That's a yearling buck. The tine length isn't there, and the mass isn't there. But he's a beautiful deer. Yearling bucks can score up to 100 inches. 2-year-olds in the wild, on average, should be 120-ish inches. They should be there. Right in there. 120, 130 is rare, but you should see 100 to 120 inch buck at a 2-year-old age. So you guys said a 2-year-old antlers there, Kyle, or are they older than that?
I think they're older, but well, maybe.
We're both dismantling our props.
Right.
Yeah, that's a 2-year-old, and that's what 115 inches, 117 inches.
Yep. So if we're for sure saying this is a year and a half, which I would agree.
Yeah, that one in your hand might not be a 2-year-old. He's got some good width, but the tine length is better than that first one.
And if you look at
the G3s, the pedicles are bigger.
The pedicles are substantially bigger. There's
pieces of brain falling all over the place. Kyle's gonna get CWD. It will be the first case where a human gets it.
I would say this is a yearling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say this is a yearling. I know this deer. I had him on a lot on trail camera, so I seen his face and his body and his belly and his structure.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely gonna say yearling here. I'm gonna say this is a 2-year-old. He's not as substantial. I mean, the antler looks the same class.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna say this is a 2-year-old, definitely. So, but go ahead to
that's a good yearling and a okay 2-year-old, right? That's one way to look at it. So your 2-year-old should be that 100 to 120 inch range on average. There could be bigger, they could be smaller. I'm saying on average, based on what I've seen in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Look at that dinky little G3. That's a yearling.
That's a sign, right?
It's so cute. A yearling buck is typically going to have tine length that's right up. See, that's a little bit different right there. So when you start talking this 3-year-old age category, which is what everybody wants, that's when you should start seeing your 130s, your 140s, occasionally 150s. That should be your 3-year-old age category on average in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Now that can change. Other states are better. Okay? Look at it. Look at the difference in the pedicle there. Completely different. Okay? Yearling versus a 3-year-old. And why, Kyle? Why do deer get bigger antlers as they get older?
For which reason? There's a million reasons, but
the main reason, their skull plate's thicker. They need bigger weapons to fight and kill other bucks.
And that pedicle every year, so your antlers fall off,
mm-hmm.
but your pedicle stays. So as you get older and you grow bigger antlers, your pedicle gets bigger. Same way your femur gets bigger. Same way, I mean,
the actual skull plate. If you were to take that skull that you were holding and rip it apart, that skull plate is going to be, if it was a yearling, you'd be looking at about 1/8 inch thick. If it was a 2-year-old, you're probably looking almost to 3/16 to 1/4 inch thick. On a fully mature whitetail buck, that skull plate can be 5/8 of an inch. Why does it get thick? Because that has to break second. The antler needs to break first. Okay? The antler needs to break first. Double XL's skull, when he died at 6 years of age, was nearly 1 inch thick. It's insane. That's just that actually looks like it's probably the same deer or very closely related that Kyle's holding up. So
Well,
your
same, same.
3-year-olds, huh?
I would say same area, same deer.
Likely the same deer or very
I don't know
closely related.
if I think if this was the same deer, this would have to be like 6 years old. But
Probably not
um,
the same deer then.
but with the points of that is look at the pedicle difference. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
screams. Look at the
Age.
size difference on them deer.
Yep.
And then you look at the mass. I mean, the best mass on this little guy is barely the point on. I hope you guys are watching this on YouTube or with the video. I mean,
Facebook.
that's so. This was, I think, this guy pushed 140. He actually has a ton of beating, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's just gnarly. Looks good. So that's probably a
And
3-year-old deer, 140 inches. That's right in there. That's what we're saying.
yep,
On average, you should be seeing 130, 140, 150 inches out of your 3-year-olds in the wild. Your 4-year-olds in the wild, those are the bucks. The 170s, the 160s, the 200s, the 180s, 190s. Those are what we all strive for. Those are what we all want. And we all have the genetic ability to get there. But how many bucks, based on size, do people shoot at 2.5? 90% of the bucks shot in Minnesota and Wisconsin are 2.5 and under. Sorry, that's the way it is. It's a 2-year-old, beautiful little buck, but it's a 2-year-old.
that's trophy in Wisconsin. Ace,
Mhm.
Ace. You guys all might not believe my my picture taking skills, but Ace is not that big of a deer. What do you think Ace is?
One
110.
I would say 120 based on the photos, but that's based on the photos. My
Yeah,
buck wasn't that big either, and he's a 2-year-old, and I know he's a 2-year-old. Why did we
but
both
he,
shoot 2-year-olds this year? You shot a 2-year-old because it was the biggest buck on your property. I shot a 2-year-old because I hadn't shot a deer with my bow in 17 years. I had to shoot something. Okay? We both had legitimate reasons.
and last year the buck I shot isn't any bigger. I mean that was first time owning the land, first time blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't much bigger. But now, like we've talked before we recorded, was that category has now been fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
We self-filmed it. Everything happened that we wanted to with Ace. That story has been written. Now next year, next year, you're gonna see this
Mm-hmm.
or tag soup.
Something bigger or nothing. And I'm looking at my property the same way.
130, 140, mature. I have all the stuff there for the first winter. I got deer moving in. I got residential bucks staying. I'm going to have a bachelor group, I bet. And there's going to be a guy like this sticking around. If there's not, tag soup.
And I can't wait for trail camera season. But May can't come soon enough. But we're going to end up splitting this into 2 parts. We're already at 45 minutes.
Are we really?
Yeah, we are.
Oh,
so
right.
We weren't sure if we had enough material here for 1. We're going to split this into 2. So moving on with double XL, getting back on track. Shoot 4-year-olds. That's the goal, right? 5, not a lot of change happens between 4 and 5. Double XL was 415 at 4. Beautiful deer. Oh, wait, no, I'm wrong. 405 at 4. Excuse me, 10 inches. I was wrong. 405 at 4 with 50-some points. At 5 years of age, he scored 415 or 415 or 418. I don't remember, but 3 inches either way, whatever. Beautiful deer. Look at the rack on this guy. And this is a velvet photo. He is thick boy, body-wise. He's not skinny. He is thick. And look at right over the top of his head. Look at that lump in between his antlers. Mm-hmm. Why is that lump there? Because his skull has gotten so thick that he doesn't want his skull to break. Look at the one that Kyle's holding up. It's just a little bump. No, this is a whole big hump. You got to walk uphill both ways on this one. It's a big one.
And
why?
Look at the pedicles. Look at the mass coming right out of the. So there's a difference. And I want a buddy of mine.
Keep talking.
A buddy of mine, his father shot a nice deer for, especially in northern Wisconsin, but the mass on it was incredible. And you have to understand that mass can be a genetic factor. So the pedicle can be similar to this guy here. That's an inch in diameter, I would say. But if he's got good genetics for mass, it can go from inch out and balloon out and have this good mass. And that's similar. Holy, it's similar to what potentially could happen. So you can have a big massy buck that's still only a 2 or 3 year old because the pedicle's small. He's just got mass genetics, is what I'm trying to say. So if you look at double XL right here, right out of his antler, right out of his forehead is all mass. I mean, that pedicle is monstrous. So just don't be confused just because he's a massy deer or he's palmated. A lot of deer can get palmated. Doesn't mean his pedicle's big, which means he's old. But most of the time, you can tell by the pedicle size, which is this big, I hope you're watching on YouTube. This big round here, and Dylan's is it 2 inches, 3 inches diameter?
I think his circumference measurements were 10 plus.
So what I'm
all
saying,
the way out.
What I'm saying is, don't let the mass of the antler trick you into thinking he's an old buck. You need to see the pedicle, the actual pedicle of it. I think in double XL's case, the pedicle is correct with the mass. He's all right. He's all right.
He's all right. He's all right. So excellent genetics. We fed the same thing. It's not feed. We didn't give him any steroids. It's genetics, people. Genetics are huge. Now, interesting argument to have here, okay? Is it possible for a wild whitetail to get this big? Absolutely. Absolutely. We did not add any material to this deer. This was all genetics. So here's an argument I pose. What did whitetail deer look like 400 years ago? We didn't add any material. But as hunters over the last 100 years, what have we done? We shoot the biggest buck we can. So when you shoot the biggest buck, you take them out of the gene pool. Now you got the lesser bucks breeding. The bucks get smaller and smaller. When were the biggest bucks shot on record?
Double-edged sword with that.
Yep.
The 40s and 50s produced bigger bucks. I think the hole in the horn buck was in the 30s.
300 plus.
Jordan buck, which was atypical, was the 20s, found in the 60s. But so I would say the 20s to the 50s, the biggest bucks, especially the ones that are recorded, were shot. From the 60s on, it's been kind of lackluster. Milo Hansen buck, sure. Minnesota Monarch,
net, nothing big.
Yeah, Minnesota Monarch is a factor, but I really believe in the next 10 years we have we have the biggest whitetail ever, which is the Huff buck. Brain fart. Milo Hansen buck was shot. The Johnny King buck was shot. Because of QDM and because everybody strives for this, we're going to hit that. There's going to be a new world record. Milo Hansen buck will not hold.
Yep.
There's an argument that the Johnny King buck is bigger. Officially, it's the Milo Hansen buck. The Huff buck is the most beautiful. It's it puts the Milo Hansen buck in a different category. That Huff buck is amazing. So the biggest bucks were what, 20s to the 50s. We had a kind of a zone there.
We got a period of time where everybody shot everything. We shot all the big bucks. But now, in the last 10 to 15 years, we've really started to focus on, as a country as a whole, for the most part, we've really started to focus on QDM and getting bucks bigger. That's what we've started to focus on. So we didn't add any genetic material. We didn't add any steroids. We fed the deer well. But guess what? Every deer in Minnesota, 99% of the state is ag. That's probably not an accurate number, but you know what I mean? It's so much ag. Our deer are fat, they're fed, they're doing well. What are they missing? Genetics and age. The genetics are within the animal, just got to bring it forward. So, one more thing with this. I could almost bet money that 400 years ago this is what whitetail deer looked like, because take a look at other cervidae. Look at elk. Look at mule deer. Look at caribou. Look at moose. Their antlers are traditionally nearly half their body size. Why are we satisfied with this? This is as big as whitetail deer get. You're telling me a 300-pound animal a 250 pound, a 200 pound animal should only be a little 10 pointer? Really, people? Come on. I'm not crazy. I'm right.
And I'll say this. The hunt for a typical whitetail, the prettiness of a typical whitetail, where the deer farm deer get all the nutrition they need, they get all the protection from predators. It's all a controlled environment. We all can agree on that. And what do? They grow non-typical antlers. This is crazy.
White-tailed deer were designed to be non-typical. They were designed to be big. We should not be satisfied with a 120-inch 10-pointer and say this is what white-tailed deer can do. No. Traditional white-tailed deer from 400 years ago were monsters.
And looked non-typical, like this. This, it's our creation of the whitetail herd we have.
Yep. That is exactly it. The whitetail deer herd is a result of our hunting pressure. We are running out of time. We're almost hitting an hour. We're gonna cut here and go to our next one. And in the next podcast, whether it comes out immediately after this one or not, I don't know, because we're still trying to finagle some guests. We kind of wanted to have a backup podcast in case we didn't have guests. So this might be a teaser for a little while. XXL, 400 plus inches of non-typical monstrous growth. He had a 238-inch typical son. Beautiful, biggest typical I've ever seen. Not really, but he's beautiful. I'll show you that one too. That was a 3-year-old, by the way.
Save it for next one.
Save it for the next one. And I'm also going to show you comparisons. So everybody says, I've heard this so many times and I'm just sick of it. We've been chasing the same buck for 15 years on our property. No, you haven't. Bull poop, bull honky. No, you ain't. No, you ain't been doing it. I'm going to show you XXL side by side with some of his offspring, and they look borderline, not identical. There's a lot of non-typical, but there's so many close, similar traits that I will show you, and you will be amazed.
On our next podcast.
On our next podcast. So, we're going to cut it off here. We got I got like 20 more. I got like 10 more pictures I was planning on showing.
No,
we
this
talked
is good.
for
This is
way
good.
too long.
Part 2.
If you hate deer farming, that's your problem. If you love white-tailed deer, you can appreciate this as well. So, Lessons of the Woods comes out every Friday at 7 p.m. Plan on having guests in the future. We're excited to have Jared Dalton from Outdoors X Media in the future, the guys from Haunted Outdoors in the future, probably my dad some more in the future. That'd be Steve Porter's Trophy Whitetail, in case you didn't know. And who knows what else we can find. We're reaching out to all sorts of fun people. So, every Friday, 7 p.m., YouTube, Facebook, anywhere you find podcasts. Find us where you found us. Send us an email at 10pointwhitetails@gmail.com or message us on Facebook. And we will see you guys next time. Adios, amigos.